My name is Brian Schuster. You and I are on the same team. We want what's best for the children of Rutherford County. The people here wearing white shirts hold the same view as I do. I'm here as a concerned parent and member of the community to address the 7 books that should be removed from our school libraries. I have taken the time to read the content in these books. I hope you have in order to make an informed decision today. Others can read the content too at bookreviewrc.com. The state of Tennessee has made this clear for us. Tennessee Code 496-3803 states, a material that 1, in whole or in part contains nudity or descriptions or depictions of sexual excitement, sexual conduct, excess violence, or sadomasochistic abuse, as those terms are defined in Tennessee Code 3917-901, is not appropriate for the age or maturity level of a student in any of the grades, kindergarten through 12, and must not be maintained in a school's library collection. Furthermore, Section C of Tennessee Code 3917-911 designates the violation of breaching this law a Class A misdemeanor. These 7 books contain nudity, descriptions or depictions of sexual excitement, sexual conduct, excess violence, and sadomasochistic abuse. Continuing to allow these books to remain in our school libraries is illegal. If there's any question whether this content fits this legal definition, I'm going to read samples from the books. As a disclaimer to parents of children here or watching online, this language is sexually explicit. I also apologize in advance for not adhering to the board's visitor policy in this adult setting. The board policy states no person will be allowed to make obscene or vulgar statements. Yet the quotes I'll be reading come from the books in our children's school libraries. The irony here is absurd. The perks of being a wallflower. He reached to take off her pants, but she started crying really hard, so he reached for his own. Please, Dave, no. She grabbed his penis with her hands and started moving it. After a few minutes, the boy pushed the girl's head down, and she started to kiss his penis. She was still crying. Finally, she stopped crying because he put his penis in her mouth. Homecoming. He put her on folded tarp, spread her legs, and entered her. She screamed. But he placed his hand over her lips and put his fingers in her mouth. He tasted her and could feel the pleasure it sent through her body. This content is sexually explicit, and keeping it in our school libraries is against the law.
Oh, I'm sorry, Thomas, okay, I messed up, sorry. Thomas Buds.
My name is Tom Buds. I'm retired from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department after 30 years of service. I supervised the major crimes unit of that 18,000 member department for 15 years. I investigated organized crime in Asia and Russia, public corruption. I carried FBI credentials and was pinned by the Secret Service. I believe that the books that Brian and we were all talking about this evening violate the state child obscenity laws, and note that the procurement, they actually violate federal child obscenity and pornography statutes, as it appears their procurement crosses state lines. I believe in this specific case, it's deceptive to argue that parents can decide what their children read. They don't often and shouldn't have to accompany their children at school libraries, screen their access to smut. I spent a lot of time in and around witness chairs in state and federal courtrooms. Being a man of Christ, I believe that each of us will be sitting in the final witness chair on the Mount of Olives where the Lord will face us from his throne with a large millstone in his hand. He's going to look all of us in the eye and he's gonna say, what did you do with these little ones that put you in trust? There's no acceptable answer except, I did what Jesus would have done. I believe these salacious books are further demonstration that our cultural values are in the toilet. I expect my elected officials to help me flush the toilet, not to put crap in it. Those claiming that we're trying to ban books, I remind you who they are. They're the ones that banned the Bible, the 10 Commandments of the Bible. The last thing I want to say, it's nice to be in a state where the school board's restrooms say men than women.
Now, Ms. Ellen Meyer.
Thank you. Okay, so starting time, right? Okay. So what does the Lord require of you but to do justice, to love kindness, and walk humbly with your God? You all know that. We all know this. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you all today about a topic close to my heart. I have lived and worked in Rutherford County for 25 years. Both my children attended Rutherford County schools. First, there's been a lot of conversation about removing books that a few people have decided are not appropriate for students. I fully support parents' rights to guide their children's reading. I also appreciate the dedicated professionals in our schools and libraries who carefully curate book collections for the communities they serve. I get that some parents may not want their kids exposed to the titles identified here, but let's be real. Whatever topics and themes you find objectionable are also accessible via that little computer in your kids' pockets. When you remove books from libraries, you're removing access for those kids who don't have the privileges of a smartphone with unlimited data. Think about that for a moment. Second, you may be aware that one of the largest industries in Rutherford County is book distribution. The challenges that are rolling across the country are having a real impact on the sales and distribution of books. The budgets of libraries and schools are being cut. Selectors are cautious about adding books to their collection because someone in their community may not like it, forcing themselves to put aside the very real needs of their core communities. Book distribution is a major force in our community, not just because of England, which is the largest book wholesaler in the world, but other businesses like my own have grown up here because Middle Tennessee has been the book distribution capital of the world. Third, all of the energy you're putting into finding and challenging a handful of books could be spent in much more positive ways. What if you put as much effort into creating a one book, one community event where schools, libraries, and everyone in the community had a conversation about a book? That could provide a real model for civil discourse. One book events have been done in cities across the country and have proven to be a powerful way for communities to come together because books can be bridges. Lastly, you find what you look for. Rather than looking for something you personally don't like or agree with, why not work together to find and celebrate a book that can become a bridge to understanding? Change the direction of the conversation. Spend time in the light because books can be bridges. Thank you.
I want everyone to be heard tonight. I just would like to ask you to please be respectful and refrain from talking or commenting during any speaker. The next speaker we have is Ms. Carrie Lambert.
Hello, okay, numerous court cases such as Counts versus Cedarville, Case versus United, PICO, a lot more I don't have time to name, have repeatedly confirmed that access to library materials cannot be limited solely on the basis of the content of those materials unless it can be demonstrated that the restriction is necessary to achieve a compelling government interest and there are no less restrictive alternatives for achieving that interest. You as a board do have a less restrictive option. Parents who want to restrict access to information could request that their child not have access to library materials, but they do not have the right to restrict access to information for everyone's children. This appears to be a matter of someone trying to impose their cancel culture agenda on our school district. And just 1 week ago today, a school district in Florida had returned 36 books to its library shelves, including Beloved and Perks of Being a Wallflower, as a result of the Parnell versus School Board of Nassau County case. They were originally removed because someone mistakenly thought they were obscene, but they don't reach that legal bar. Of relevance here is that at least some of the complainants used information from BookLooks, which has the exact same information as bookreviewrc.com, which a board member suggested we all check out. So let's be clear. The books being considered today do not meet the bar necessary to be considered legally obscene. And that's just a fact based on legal definitions, not my opinion. And I am not saying that some of the material in the books doesn't meet your definition of obscene. I'm saying it doesn't meet the legal definition of obscene. And that's what the issue is here. The law, not our personal opinions. This is probably why you've received a joint letter last spring from the National Coalition Against Censorship, the Authors Guild, American Booksellers for Free Expression, Children's and Youth Adult Book Committee from PEN America, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, the National Council of Teachers of English, as well as the recent letter from the ACLU. As far as using taxpayer money to pay for the books, do you really think taxpayers want to waste money defending the decisions made by this board to restrict access to information when case law shows we are guaranteed to lose? We're certainly not getting our money back for those books if we pull them from our shelves. The books have been on the shelves for years and caused no harm. There is no need to do it. It just wastes a lot of our time and taxpayer dollars. So when you're making your decisions tonight, please consider the source you're getting your information from, legal experts versus an extremist website that has not held up in court.
Time. Our next speaker is Ms. Hannah Faulkner.
Thank you so much for allowing us to speak. It is 2024, and here we are debating whether or not sexually explicit content should be in public schools funded by American taxpayers. Now, I'm going to read a few sentences out of these books, and before I do, I just want to say that as a 17-year-old, I am disgusted by the sentences and the words and statements mentioned in these books. It's honestly, it embarrasses me. I did not want to come up on this podium and read this aloud, but I think that that's what needs to happen. So before I do though, on the Rutherford County under review page, it says mature content warning. This website may contain content of adult nature. If you are easily offended or under the age of 18, please exit now. So this book, Beloved, which one of the young ladies was defending, here is, I don't know the exact page that this is on, but I think it's on page 24. It says, overwhelmed as much by the downright luck of finding her house and her in it as by the certainty of giving her his sex, Paul D. dropped 25 years from his recent memory, a stair step before him and baby Suggs' replacement, the new girl they dreamed of at night, and effed cows for at dawn while waiting for her to choose. And that's just a paragraph of this book. This entire book is about a slave girl, and I know one of the ladies mentioned it was defending that we're trying to remove history from our libraries and from our school system. I don't care if you're black, white, Hispanic, Asian, female, or male. Sexually explicit content should not be in public schools. And for anyone that will bring up the notion that we are just a bunch of book banners, number one, we're not banning books, we simply want to protect children. Number two, what's concerning is that you all think it's okay for children to be viewing pornographic content and explicit material. But I would implore you all to ask yourself, does putting the age limit to drink alcohol at 21 mean that we are banning alcohol? No, we are just putting restrictions on it. Does putting the limit to legally drive a car at 16 mean that we are trying to ban driving? No, we are just creating boundaries. Does removing sexually explicit content from public schools mean we are banning books? No, we are asking for restrictions to protect children. This is common sense. And I want every single member, every single person in this room to understand that I get messages from people in California on a weekly basis telling me about books they found in Rutherford County libraries and how they thought that moving to Rutherford County and sending their kids to public school here would be so much better. But the response is that it just got worse because politicians and leaders here call themselves conservatives, but they go and defend keeping books like these in our public schools. And at least in California, they aren't afraid to share what they believe in. I hope you all will make the right decision and show Tennesseans that you don't support pornography and explicit content in public schools. Thank you and God bless.
Next, we have Mr. Matt Figgins. Not here.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Quite an audience here tonight. And I think I'm in a good spot to give my public comment here because I think it's pretty obvious what's about to happen here tonight. The people who are against these books, it definitely appears that we're about to see some theatrics tonight from these books. I originally signed up to speak at what I thought was the work session, but I did not realize I was actually signed up for tonight. That's my bad, that's on me. But as I sat and listened to the conversation, I decided to change the topic of my comment from school safety to library material review that is on the agenda tonight. So much time and effort were put into this topic the other night. I wish we could put that effort towards more important issues rather than letting one board member try to dictate what books should or should not be in the library based on book reviews posted to a website associated with an extremist group. For those who do not know what I'm referring to, let me explain. At the work session on Tuesday, one board member directed everyone to a website called bookreviewrc.com. When RCLA reviewed the site later that night, we found it alarming. The website was only created a few days ago, and there's no indication of who owns it. All the reviews on the site say, generated by booklooks.org, every single one of them. In more, the lack of transparency is alarming, and trying to pass off reviews from another website as if they were from our county is incredibly misleading. We need to keep in mind where these reviews come from. BookLooks is associated with Moms for Liberty, which is categorized as an anti-government extremist group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. This outside group has clear motives, and I am concerned about the use of their materials by this school board. Please do not give weight to these reviews. They amplify only small portions of the work and do not consider it as a whole. Remember, the Miller test says appeal to period interest and patently offensive and taken as a whole lacks serious literary value. Emphasis here on the word and. You can't separate them. They go together. So I ask you, have you read the whole books? Or are you relying on the samples from an extremist group to base your decisions? Removing these books based on selected reviews from questionable sources sets a dangerous precedent of censorship. Books are meant to challenge, inspire, and educate, even when they push us out of our comfort zones. Let's teach students to think critically, not fear the unknown. One last point I'll make. When Rutherford County had a library material review board, every time they reviewed a book, it was never removed from the libraries. 0. One school board member has had 29 removed. One person should not have that much input. Thank you.
So good evening. You will be voting
on 7 books to determine if they have any content in them that is sexually explicit. The state law that if the state law states that if books have been deemed to have any sexual explicit content in it, no matter to what degree, just any. So according to the Tennessee Code, it provides definitions to help guide you in making the decision tonight that you have. But let's take a look at one of the definitions. It's number 14, where it says sexual content. It says potentially offensive representation and description of ultimate sexual acts, normal or perverted, actual or simulated. A sexual act is stimulated when it depicts explicit sexual activities that give the appearance of ultimate sexual acts, anal, oral, genital. This is just some of the partial descriptions that is described in the Tennessee Code. So let's hear some of the content from these 7 books. Dreamed of a night and fucked the cow. Sucking on my breast, the one still in her, cock testing. He put her on a folded tarp, spread her legs and entered her. She screams, but he placed his hand over her lips and put his fingers in her mouth. She crossed her legs, working her prowess as a cock teaser. This content seems pretty clear to me that it is defined, that as defined by the Tennessee Code as sexual explicit. This is not about the freedom of speech or topics of these books. It's not about how you even feel. This is not about creating a safe space or a mature space for these books. You are giving the position to make a determination if any of the language in these books, the content of these books, is explicit sexual content. So your vote tonight will let students, parents, and the public know how you personally stand and that comes to the content of these books. So I just pray that God be with you in this decision and that you will take in consideration that it's about the content, not the topic, not your feelings, and definitely not all this drama. Thank you.
I hope we're going to say her name right, but next we have Zan Lasco.
Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm speaking as a retired high school librarian from Rutherford County Schools. I would like to take my time to answer and clarify some of the questions and comments that came up during the working session this week. Number 1, how do you get books get to the library? I believe this question was answered for the most part, and thanks to the board members who visited libraries. We are professionals with master's degrees that do our due diligence vetting books from academic journals and library reviews. We have professional associations and peers. Because we are under very strong financial constraints, we use all of these resources. Number 2, bookreviewrc.com. The site that Mr. Tidwell directed you to is not backed by professional librarians. This site takes excerpts directly from the website, booklooks.org. That organization was started by Moms for Liberty, a Moms for Liberty founder. If you do not know Moms for Liberty, you need to research their viewpoint on this subject. Again, it is not backed by any professional librarians. Number 3, this is not book banning. Actually, it is. When access is denied to books, it becomes an equity and discriminatory issue. We serve all students, not just privileged ones. Some students do not have the means to go to the public library, especially in rural areas like in Rutherford County. Some families can't run down to Barnes & Noble and purchase a book. Some parents don't see the need to buy books for home when students have access at school. These are all things I've witnessed and heard from students directly. Number 4, is this a slippery slope? Can the Bible be next? Yes. Once the action is taken to start defining, you've opened the door to all books. In a large high school library like we have here, there are approximately 10,000 books, give or take. In some Tennessee districts, hundreds of books have been pulled and are awaiting review, unavailable for students. This, mind you, has happened to students who also lived through the COVID epidemic. As noted earlier, a lawsuit recently filed in Florida against an aggressive district had those books returned. At this point, RCS is one of the most aggressive book owners. Number 5, obscenity. These books would not meet that criteria under federal law, and there are no books in school libraries that would. The bottom line is this: a book is not considered obscene until it is ruled that way in a court of law. What do we want to spend our school funds on? And finally, high school students today. I want you to think about this. In our libraries, we have military recruiters that often meet with students. They offer these students an education in return for military service. When at 18, they are given a gun and sent across the world to protect our nation. These are our young adults we have helped gain a worldview as minors. If we trust them to do that, can't we trust them to understand what's in books, and more importantly, have parents, librarians, and teachers to discuss this with? A library is a place of voluntary inclusion. No one makes a student read a book.
Time.
There should be books for all students.
Sorry. Next we have Ms. Lindsay Schultz.
Good afternoon, members of the council and fellow citizens of Rutherford County. My name is Lindsay Schultz, and I own the Spine Bookshop here in Smyrna, Tennessee. I'm here to speak out against the proposed book banning of the following books, and I wonder if all of you have read any or all of the books. I am the person I am today because of the books that I read as a child, teen, and young adult, because they challenged my thinking, educated me on issues I was previously unaware of. Books are a powerful tool for education, empathy, and personal growth. They allow us to explore ideas, cultures, and perspectives that may be different from our own, and they encourage critical thinking and imagination. It seems that these books are covering issues that everyone is facing today, like racism, homophobia, mental illness, disability, suicide, and sexual topics. Just because these issues are uncomfortable to read about does not mean that we shouldn't. Instead, they should be used to have an open and safe discussion to further our understanding. We are marching backwards instead of going forward. Banning any books on these subject matters is not going to make them go away. People are gay. There is racism, and as we know, mental health and suicide are on the front of our communities right now. Taking these books out of libraries is not going to make these subjects going to go away. They're out in the world for everyone to see, and by banning these books, you're just forcing these people to go into hiding, and you're forcing them to be afraid to learn about the world around them. There is nothing that will cause someone to read a book faster than telling them that they can't read it. Banning books is a form of censorship that not only limits access to knowledge, but also fosters a climate of fear and intolerance. Our public libraries and schools should be a safe haven for intellectual freedom, not a battleground for ideological wars. We must remember that books are not dangerous. It's the ideas they contain that some people fear. Yet the beauty of literature is that it lies in its ability to challenge our assumptions, broaden our horizons, and ignite very meaningful conversation. And instead of banning these books, let's promote values of dialogue and understanding. Let's equip our community with the tools to engage with challenging texts rather than shield them from ideas that they may find uncomfortable. And after all, it's through open and honest discourse that we grow and learn as individuals and as a society. In conclusion, banning books is promoting ignorance, and ignorance is what causes hate, and I urge you to reconsider banning these books instead and focus on cultivating a love of literature and respect for diverse ideas. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Kristen Faulkner. Ms. Faulkner?
both of us are signed up to speak, and she was asking me to speak for her because she's embarrassed to read the books. Is that okay?
Okay.
Okay. So my name is James Faulkner, Trey Faulkner. I'm her husband. As a father of 4, married for 20 years, I was personally embarrassed and ashamed when reading the excerpts from these books. Each book that we have here to discuss this evening has clear and obvious sections of pornographic scenes. It honestly should not be readily available for anyone to read, much less a minor. Reading some of the excerpts, it is discouraging that we have come to the point in our culture that we are even having this discussion. I believe right now today, in my 3 minutes, there's a spiritual battle going on, and the spiritual environment is extremely thick. There's a battle between good and evil going on here. The party of slavery, the party of KKK, the party of abortion, and the party of the rainbow sex cult are trying to pervert the minds of our innocent children. Yes, we are trying to ban books. We're trying to ban books that have pornographic material in them. Words like the word cock should not be in a book for a kid. The word penis should not be in the word in a book for children to read. I'm going to read a couple excerpts here. This is from the Perks of a Wallflower. This scene that I'm going to read you is actually a rape scene. Okay? Our kids don't need to be reading this crap. And the boy kept working up the girl's shirt, and as much as she said no, he kept working on her. After a few minutes, she stopped protesting, and he pulled her shirt off after she said no. And she had a white bra with lace. I honestly didn't know what to do by this point, the girl said. Pretty soon, he took off her bra and started to kiss her breasts. This is visual pornography, and it's inappropriate. And then he put his hand down her pants, and she started moaning. This is visual pornography.
Yes.
But she started crying because he's raping her. Okay? Kids don't need to be reading this trash. But she started crying really hard, so he reached out for his own. He pulled his pants and underwear off. And she said no to his knees. Please, Dave, no. This is rape. Okay? Our society has become desensitized to sexual immorality. But the boy just talked soft to her and manipulated her, how good she looked and things like that. And then she grabbed his penis with her hands and she started moving it. This is pornography. After a few minutes, the boy pushed the girl's head down and she started to kiss his penis. She was still crying because she was being raped. Finally, she stopped crying when he forced his penis into her mouth. This is pornography. Yes, we want to ban books. Stop with the stupid semantics. Another excerpt. Melina had always appreciated the attention of Fretz and had been attentive to him, but somehow his body had not been as supple as Turtle's heart for the book Wicked. She drifted off to sleep with Turtle Heart's mouth on one of her nipples. This is pornography. And his hands, his big hands, roaming like sentient pets over her body. She imagined that Turtle Heart divided his body when her eyes were closed. His mouth roamed over her body. His cock became hard and rose. This is pornography. He nudged and leaned. His breath was somewhere other than his mouth. And I'll close by saying this. You call me extreme for wanting to protect the innocence of children. I call you extreme for wanting to expose them to pornography.
Our last speaker will be Ms. Barbara Lady. Miss Lady? I guess not. We will be moving on to number 7, Rutherford County. Library Book Review number 13.
Madam Chairman, I'm going to offer a motion.
Chair recognizes Mr. Ball.
I'm going to offer a motion for purposes of discussion. I move to instruct the high school librarian, otherwise known as media specialist, to create an area for parent approval only for books. This section will immediately, upon passage of this motion, be created tomorrow, and any library having any one of these 7 books shall maintain them in this area. Going forward, any book contained high school libraries that have a rating of 3 or 4 on booklooks, or shall also be contained in this area, and any book with a rating of 5 shall immediately be removed. Furthermore, any book purchased or donated that falls into this rating system of 3 or 4 shall also be contained in this area. I so move.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, that was Leslie.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I'm gonna ask that we talk about what we're supposed to be doing with these 7 books before we move forward with Mr. Lott's motion. These books were brought up according to state law. State law doesn't talk about a mature reading list, that's a separate issue if the board would like to create a mature reading list. And I think we need to get probably Mr. Reed up here to go over what the state law is and how we're supposed to be handling this particular situation. And then working, if the board chooses to work on a mature reading list, that's like a separate, these were challenged under the state law, so that has to be answered to.
Mr. Reed. We have a motion, we have a seconded, and then Ms. Darby would like us to. Can you give us some?
So, with respect to, your question with respect to the challenge on these books, understand the challenge on these books are based on them being, had explicit sexual content. And if they're deemed to be obscene, then they have to be removed from the school system. That's basically what the law is. If there is another challenge to these schools, to these books, to say that they're age inappropriate, there's a mechanism to address whether or not books are age inappropriate, and that is in the statute as well, and provides for the basis of the school board to determine whether or not a book is appropriate for the age to which the book is made accessible in schools. I think the question that's before you tonight is with respect to these books, and correct me if I'm wrong with respect to this, is that if these books are deemed to be sexually explicit and obscene within the definition of TCA, then they should be removed from the schools. The statute with respect to the definition of obscenity is what we've heard people talk about, and this is a statutory definition that's been incorporated in our state laws. It says basically obscene means the average person applying contemporary community standards would find that the work taken as a whole appeals to the prurient interest. The average person applying contemporary community standards would find that the work depicts or describes in a patently offensive way sexual conduct. And C, the work taken as a whole lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. Those 3 standards come from what has been known as the Miller test, which is a U.S. Supreme Court test that's been adopted to measure what is deemed to be obscene or not. Now, you as elected officials are representatives of our community. So you are good people to decide what the contemporary community standards are for our county. So it's, of course, somewhat subjective what contemporary standards are, but you as elected representatives can determine what your belief is, the contemporary community standards that would apply to these books. And so that's the statute that you would apply.
Are we evaluating them on that statute, or are we evaluating them on TCA 496-3803? Because that states that in whole or in part contains nudity, descriptions or depictions of sexual excitement, sexual conduct, excess violence, or sadomasochistic abuse, as those terms are defined in 3917-901, is not appropriate for the age or maturity level of a student in any of the grades K through 12 and must not be maintained in a school's library collection. And above that, it states materials in a library collection must be suitable for the age and maturity levels of the students who may access the materials. So I think we have like 2 different laws we're looking at, and I think the board needs to know which law and which we're supposed to be looking at before we place a vote on those 7 books. I think that's where we have to start, because I think there's been confusion about whether this is going under 3803 or going under the obscenity law that's listed in 901.
Well, the statute you cited does refer back to 3917-901 because it incorporates the definitions of 3917-901 in the statute.
But it incorporates those definitions as the terms listed here, and obscene is not one of them.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I understand, yes.
So if we go back to those definitions, sexual conduct means patently offensive representations or descriptions of ultimate sexual acts, normal or perverted, actual or simulated. A sexual act is simulated when it depicts explicit sexual activity that gives the appearance of ultimate sexual acts, anal, oral, or genital. Ultimate sexual acts means sexual intercourse, anal or otherwise fellatio, cunnilingus, or sodomy, or patently offensive representations or descriptions of masturbation, excretory functions, and lewd exhibition of the genitals. Sexual excitement means the condition of human male or female genitals when in a state of sexual stimulation or arousal. So if 3803 is what we're going by and those are the definitions, that's fine. I just need to be clear that that is what we're having to base our decision on, because once again, this is about adhering to state law at this point. This isn't about how I feel about the book. It's not about how somebody else feels about the book. The people who've been elected to the state of Tennessee have put these laws in place, and we're being asked to look at these books in relation to the law of the state of Tennessee.
I understand that the explanation I was given with respect to these items, that they were brought under 3803, has to be something to be objected to. The agenda is not clear, because the agenda does not state which statute these are being challenged under. So it's an agenda item, there's not a clear delineation which statute is being applied in this case. I understand the conversation through 3803, but we can discuss that. That was the intent of how this got on the agenda.
Ms. Maxwell? Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm confused because I was told today, and I spoke to other people too. If I need to understand how these books were being challenged, because if they were challenged on the statute that Ms. Darby has been speaking on, they should have never come to us at all. I talked to TSBA, and they said if they're challenged based upon what you were saying, they do not come before the board. But they will come straight to the board if it's based on obscene. So I'm confused as to how these books are being challenged, because if they're being challenged on the statute, my understanding is that they're not supposed to be coming straight to the board, and it was supposed to be determined that they're removed for whatever reason. But I was told that this challenge has been on the premises of obscene, and so therefore it came straight to the board, and then now, because it's obscene, we have to overlook that statute and then look at the obscenity side of it, which falls to 3 parts, which doesn't, and that part of it doesn't matter whether there's a part of a section, we have to take the book as a whole. So I need to know myself, whoever challenged it, where do we stand on this?
Master, can I just ask a clarifying question, because I think there are 3 kind of pieces when books are challenged. And correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Reed. I think there's the age appropriate, which I believe
No, it's
Mr.
not age
Wallace.
appropriate.
No,
Sorry, Dallas, you're not
Okay,
understanding.
I apologize.
I think that there's the age appropriate, which does not come before the board. There's the obscenity, which comes before the board, and then there's this piece on 3803. So to my knowledge, there's 3 different ways for a book to be challenged, and from what I have read in here, I don't know that this says each local board of education and public charter school governing body shall adopt a policy for developing and reviewing school library collections, and goes into the whole policy and all of that. But the law clearly states that if the books meet this, they are to be removed, but it doesn't speak specifically to that, so I don't know if that falls directly to our board policy, and I'm honestly not sure that our board policy spoke specifically to that piece of law.
You know, there's something I don't understand about all this. You know, we're sitting here talking about all this stuff, and Mr. Vaught made a motion that these books are gonna be taken out of circulation. What is it you folks want? A book burning, I mean, we can go out here and pile them up and burn them out in the front yard, but they're out of circulation. What is it you want? They're out of circulation. What do you want? What do you people want? That, you know, you're here tonight, and let me say this. Since I got the phone for just a minute. You know, you talk about these books, but have you checked your child's cell phone? How many of y'all, if you aren't, raise your hand for kids.
Madam Chair.
So anyway.
Ms. Maxwell, can I say something about what Mr. Paul?
I guess I owe everybody an explanation, so I'm gonna try to dive into this and look at it. I know this is a very sensitive subject for a lot of people, and there's a lot of emotions, and, everything's flowing, and most people have been respectful tonight, some people have not. Some people have got shock value out of this, and the reason, you know, Butch and I think I can say this, we're the new guys on the block, and we asked for this job. We're both in the point of our careers that, I hate to admit it, but I'm one of the oldest people on the committee. I used to be one of the youngest when I was first elected to the county commission, but that was almost 40 years ago. And what I've observed over the years is that we get in a room like this and everybody's a lawyer. Everybody's got an opinion, right? Everybody's opinion counts too. Everybody has a vote, and I want to respect that. A humorous comment I heard one time, and I'm going to brand it to Mayor Richard Reed, said, he said, you know, after a hot topic one night at a city council meeting, they got ready to vote on an issue, and everybody had their say about it. And Mayor Reed said, he said, well, I just want everybody to know this. I've got friends on this side of the issue, I've got friends on this side of the issue, and I'm for my friends. Okay? I'm here for the entire community. What we are as elected representatives, this is, best I can remember, a republic. Mr. Reed, correct me if I'm wrong, but, you know, democracy is where the mob rules. A republic is not. A republic is where everybody has a fair shake. There's been many definitions given to it, and I'm not going to bore the crowd with it tonight, but I've been up since 3 o'clock this morning. I read the Constitution twice. I've read opinions about everything, and everybody's got an opinion. And the conclusion I had come to is there's got to be some type of middle ground. Some people are not going to be happy with it. Others maybe will see the wisdom that Butch and I have tried to come up with. And yes, Butch and I talked about this. He and I have taken it upon ourselves to visit every school in this county since we become new board members. We're not done, but we have been to all the high schools but one. We visited with all the, I want to call them librarians, Dr. Sullivan, but I guess they're media specialists now. I have the utmost confidence in these ladies. They've done a good job. I think Ms. Sharp said the other night when I asked the question, how do we get books? It's just a box that comes, there's a box of books that shows up. Not to be critical, Ms. Sharp, but I think there's a little more thought that goes into that. These ladies are educated. You know, Pulitzer Prize winning books are something that are to be valued. They may make you think, they may appall you. As Caleb said the other night, some of it is smut. Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. And I don't think that our children need to be easily accessible to that. And where this came from, Caleb mentioned the other night about having playboys in the schools. And I said, I think it was Caleb that directed that question to me, but hey, I've got a floor right now. She scolded me the other night talking over it. So I'm gonna get my piece out and y'all have that. But it made me think about it. When I was a younger person, you go in the drugstore the Playboys were behind the counter. They were wrapped up. You had to show your ID or walk of shame or whatever it is. I'm not suggesting that with our students or our children do that, but I do think parents need to be engaged. I really firmly believe that, you know, and it's obvious that this crowd is upset. They just don't want carte blanche accessibility to some of these titles. Can't blame them. I don't like them. I wouldn't read it. And I'll be honest with you, I read the reviews on some of them, and you know, it is a shock value. I'm disappointed in a lot of people trying to get a rise out of everybody. We all read them. We all have seen the reviews. It was uncalled for to come to that podium tonight and broadcast this, but if it made you feel better, I'm glad you got it off your chest. But at this point, you know, you want to practice law. Everybody wants to practice law. Are you scared of the ACLU? You know, Caleb says he's not. I, for one, I don't want to spend $500,000 defending a lawsuit, just like the city of Murfreesboro just got through doing. I don't think that's wise use of taxpayer dollars. I don't know that this is a hill I want to die on, you know, because of that. I don't want to take the books out and then turn around a year from now after we spent $500,000 of your money defending it and still lose. I don't know that we would. Again, everybody's got an opinion around here. But one of the things that I read through this, and I'll wind this up, Madam Chairman, is going back to Pacifica. Would that be the case? I think I'm testing your law school, but it was the one. Some of you that are gray-haired like me can remember a comedian named George Carlin did a routine years ago. 7 words you can't say on TV. Y'all remember that? Some of you do. Kind of humorous, you know, as a teen before I was in high school. It was a shock value at my point in time in my career or history, and that case ended up, not Mr. Carlin, but the case, the 7 words ended up at the Supreme Court. And there was a ruling on it. And I think briefly what it was there was a radio station broadcasted, and they got in trouble with the FCC, and the FCC wouldn't issue another license, and they appealed it. But what came out of the Supreme Court decision on it was, yes, there is freedom of speech, much like, you know, we realize that, and that's what we're trying to defend, is freedom of thought, freedom of expression, freedom to carry arms. But there are limitations. The right to bear arms doesn't give us the right to have a nuclear weapon, nor does the right of free speech give us the right to run into this room right now and holler fire. That's a problem we've got at schools right now. We've got a lot of threats going on. And it's unfortunate. Oldham High School lost a whole day of instruction last week. And these threats, and I get it. When I signed up for this, I never dreamed. I thought my expertise would be about building schools, managing money. It's about keeping your kids safe. That's the #1 priority this board has got and this administration's got. He's done it. And I'm gonna say, hell of a job. I haven't known the man but 6 weeks, and I'm very proud to work side by side with him. But the Pacifica case came out to say that, you know, there's a time and place for everything. I think the verbiage is something like this, you know, there's nothing wrong with the hog, but the hog doesn't need to be in the living room. You know, there's nothing wrong probably with these books. For some of us it is, for others it's not. But, you know, do they all need to have accessibility to every child? I don't think so. So that's the reason I made offer the motion to try to give us a policy direction. I've been told that we run by policy. I hope this continues that way. I trust our librarians. I trust Dr. Sullivan and his tenure to hire principals and hire good librarians. One thing I think Mr. Vaughn and I have noticed is that some of our employees are taking this as a slight. That's not a reason to vote for or against this motion, but these people go to school to learn this, to administer this to our children, to teach them. And the love of reading, my God, if you could see the test scores, I'm just glad they're picking up a book. Some of them, right? You know? So anyway, that's my piece. I had to get it off of me.
I would like to hear from Mr. Bidwell and Mr. Clark, if everyone's been heard.
Just a couple things on that. So you're talking about defending a lawsuit to the ACLU. I don't know why my mic's so hot. But you'll be defending the lawsuit for keeping the sexually explicit books in our schools if you go that way. The content's out there now. So, am I good? Hot mic. All right. I don't know what to do with it.
Ms. Rosales?
Can you hear me better? Maybe a little bit, maybe not. Either way, you'll have a lawsuit if you keep the sexually explicit content, because now that content is available and been publicly mentioned. Not only has it been publicly mentioned, but the website, I want to go back to that real quick. So there was some different stuff brought about challenging the website or booklets and all this stuff. I used the site, a guy that was trying to help me. He asked how you help. I said, share the content. If you share the content, that's what we're talking about. So this is easier access for those to share the content. Not everybody has the ability to read all of the books, but if you see the content that's in question, then you can make a decision based off of that. But the content's out there. The ratings, I'm totally against hiding them behind some law, having some mature section in our schools. I think that's extremely inappropriate. If it's sexually explicit, it's sexually explicit. To go back to the discussion we was having with Mr. Reed, I could argue either way. I could argue it, which most of the time I use the word obscene, I follow it up with sexually explicit, because I think we all understand that term a lot better. If you want to go through the Miller test, let's do that. All right, so this is, and I'll go through I know you talk about all being lawyers, but I went through a lot of this on the work session, but apparently the same topics and same items are coming up, so I'll address that here. The Miller test, that's Miller versus California, 1973, would be found by the average person applying contemporary and community standards. Who's the person in charge of those contemporary community standards? Who makes that decision? The Supreme Court has ruled that is made by the closest elected officials, which is the school board, to the community. So that's subjective, that's why they have the school board do it. It's patently offensive to prevailing standards in the adult community. Patently offensive, prevailing standards. Who decides what those standards are? Who says that it's offensive? I think it's patently offensive that we are exposing minors to sexually explicit content. I think that's easily justified. Taken as a whole, lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value for minors. The word serious there, how are we going to determine whether something is serious enough that it should warrant keeping sexually explicit content that's funded by taxpayers' dollars and not handed out, but available to minors? I don't think you can defend any of those on these books. I don't think that using, as much as I appreciate the work that's been done on some of these sites and by other individuals, and I appreciate some of the items you said about removing the books that are rated a 5, I appreciate that. However, those are still subjective ratings. And so I may disagree with those ratings. This board, which is according to Supreme Court law, this board is the final stop. You may disagree with those ratings and want to pull a book out then. So if we create this mature reading list, then you're just gonna have librarians stack books back behind there, and we're still holding those in our school. That is in direct violation of 49-6-3803. It's already been read. I read it in the work session. Katie read it tonight. Mr. Reed read it as well. I just don't see how there's a leg to stand on. I think what you were at and where we are tonight, we're talking about these 7 books. Start there. You have to decide. The content's been made available to every board member. Mr. Reed distributed all that out to us. Everybody's seen the content. You heard some of it read tonight, but you have to read it. You have to decide if it's sexually explicit or not. As you mentioned the other night, we were going to do a roll call vote and go down book by book by book. Now here we are debating on whether to keep sexually explicit content in here. I have this whole thing I'm going to talk about the damage this does to adolescents, the studies that have been shown, the results of those consequences. But I guess I'll stay, we're gonna continue to debate, so I'd like to hear what arguments there are for keeping sexually explicit content in our schools. Sharp?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I spoke with Joe Padilla earlier today. First of all, I'd like to enter these emails. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, that sent emails in support of us taking these books out of our library. I've got 13. Plus of them, I didn't get them all printed off today, so there's 3 more. About 3 came in, wanting us to keep them, so there was a lot more that we need to live in. I'd like to enter them into the official record of the meeting. So when I spoke with Joe Padilla is a school board member in Wilson County, probably at least a 4, maybe a 5-year school board member. Under the law, the 8303, they closed their library the first of the year. Dr. Sullivan and I had talked about it earlier this year. We were thinking that they closed it because they were giving out the laptops. No, they were not closing it because they gave out the laptops. They were closing it because the 8303 made them take everything that was in their mature reading list to leave the schools. They took every single book out. So we can go down this route of Mr. Ball, but this law tells us we can't have a mature reading list. It has to go. Now, we can take those books, one of the things that they suggested, to take those books to the public library. So they're not wasted, they're not put behind the scenes, they're not thrown away. So, I mean, I'm completely open to do that, but, I think we've got to remove these books. They're sexually explicit, they're obscene, and I've got a 24-year-old, and I wouldn't give any of those to him.
Madam Chair, I'd like to say one other thing. You know, this motion that Mr. Vaughn has made, these books are taken out of circulation. And by that means these kids, unless your parent gives you permission, they have no access to them. Now, I don't know why we're causing all this friction in the community, among church members and whoever, but they're taking out kids. Kids have no access to them. They can't get them. And I don't know, I'm ready to vote. I'm ready to vote myself.
Mr. Reed, I need a little guidance here. We have a motion from Mr. Vaughn. Can we entertain this motion, or do we need to do line by line for each book?
You can, there's a motion and a second, so the board can take up the motion.
Ms. Maxwell? Yes. I am so confused because when I talked to Ben Torres from TSBA, and he said that if we're dealing with sexual explicit books, that should have never come to the board. And that if we're going to be voting on the books, it's based on obscenity and it goes straight to the board. So again, how do these books came to us if they're under sexual explicit? Why are we sitting here and creating all this angst if the statute already speaks to it? I just want clarity, because my understanding, there's 2 ways to challenge the books. It's based on obscenity and it's based on age inappropriate. Then I was going to read everything that he said to me, Ben Torres, as I talked to him. He sent me an email, but I don't have my laptop when it went off. It died. So, so there's the 2 ways. And when it's age inappropriate, it's whole in part. If it's obscenity, it's based on the whole book in itself, and you gotta go through the 3-prong test. And he also said, just because there's words there that you may not like, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be sexual explicit, because you still have to go through that Miller test. So I'm so confused as to what we're supposed to be doing. If it's indeed the truth that these books follow that sexual explicit aspect of it, it should have never come to us to vote for it. So that's where I'm at.
Madam Chair, let me start answer possibly.
So in 3803, it continues to state, each local board of education shall adopt a policy. And our policy reads, as defined in TCA 901, I'm not gonna go into all the descriptions again with the definitions, but it says, if it meets those definitions, it shall be immediately removed from all libraries within the school district and then reviewed for final decision by the board. That is what our policy states. did not go before the school board. They didn't vote on it. Under 3803, they just removed every single one of them. Every book that they had in there, the mature reading list, they were gone. Taken up.
Mr. Reed,
The policy said, and of course, the board has to act in accordance with this policy. So the policy of this board says, as Ms. Garvey said, as defined in TCA 3917-901, that references that same statute we've been talking about. Any picture, photograph, drawing, sculpture, motion picture, film, or similar visual representation or image of a person or portion of the human body in whole or in part, which depicts nudity, sexual conduct, sexual excitement, excess violence, or sadomasochistic abuse, is patently offensive, or appeals to the prurient interest, shall be immediately removed from all libraries within the school district and then reviewed for final decision by the board. So then someone has to make a determination under TCA 3917-901 what books fall in that category. And when that statute references the obscenity statute. And that's what the courts who review these matters have looked at. So in evaluating all these published materials, you have to apply this obscenity standard to them. Someone has to do that. So no one has done that yet, I guess, with respect to these books. But it was brought on the board agenda and placed on the board agenda for this board to take some action on these books with regard to them, because someone believed it fell within the definition of a book that should be prohibited.
and we have 60 days,
Yes.
and this would be
So,
within the 60 days.
yes. And so it's within the discretion of this board, since this item has been brought before the board, to determine how it wants to handle this matter with respect to these books that have been brought before it. So ultimately, that's a decision this board has to make. And it's been said tonight, you guys are, the board members are the representatives of our community, and know best what our community standards are, and how you want to address these books that have been brought before you tonight. So that's how it comes to this board.
So, I'm sorry.
Yes, Mr.
Thank you,
Phelps.
Mr. I'm so sorry. So I want to be clear, so we're not going under obscenity, it's based on sexual explicit?
You're going, when this comes to the board only asks for support for its policies.
Right, so the policy said that it's removed because it has all this stuff, and so we have a final review and remove it. Right, so I think the problem is that I was under the pretenses that this is all about obscenity. But now we're going back to say that our policy says that if it contains all that stuff in the books, that we automatically remove it, and we bring it before the board, and it's automatically removed. As a final
The
review.
policy says, as defined in CCA 3917-901. That statute is the statute that defines obscenity, and all these subcomponents that go into the definition of obscenity. So it is a statute that defines obscenity, is essentially what this statute is. And what this policy, what we have adopted does, it refers back to the statute. So you have to go back to the statute, read the statute. And so there has to be a determination made by someone of whether or not these books fall in the definition of obscenity.
So
If they are determined to be obscene, we are required to remove them from our schools, like we talked about. And it comes back to the board for your approval as far as your ultimate decision as to what you do with these books. That is the decision that's been brought before this board tonight, is for this board to go ahead and make a decision on these books that have been brought, so that it's within this board's discretion to decide what it wants to do with respect to these books.
Madam Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Ball.
kind of go back and highlight, and Francis, I understand, I think every one of us, I have read 49-whatever, that's the statute that governs the operation of schools. You got another statute over here that deals with other things. The Tennessee Code Annotated is a fascinating work. However, again, I'm gonna go back to Mr. Vaughn and I being the two oldest people on this board. In my life experience, there's always conflicts in the law. And I think everybody in this room would concur with this statement. We're all tired of the federal government dictating exactly what goes on in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. I think some of us in this room are a little concerned about the dictation coming from Nashville the Murfreesboro, Tennessee. What my motion does, or what this policy change that I'm driving towards will do, is put that in our hands to create an environment that, as I see it, protects the people and the young people that don't want to see this, but yet make it available to those parents and those students that deem it literary for whatever reason. It's not for me to judge. It's not for any of us to judge in this room. It's for us to kind of create a policy and an environment for these students to learn. That's not the angle here I'm driving at. I'm not trying to circumvent something. I'm not trying to make a bold statement or shock value or anything like that. I'm just trying to come to somewhat, and I hate to use the word compromise, because I don't know that this is a compromise. This is something that probably should have been done years ago, that these books need to have parental engagement. You don't want your kid reading it, don't let them check it out. That would be how I would say it. So,
So it's already in our hands. That's what the court has decided. So that's where we're at. It's in our hands to make the decision and make that determination as we are those. You said you don't want, you mentioned federal making decisions for us. You don't want the state necessarily making decisions for us. You don't want national making decisions for us. That's correct. It comes down to us. We're here in Rutherford County. We're elected officials. These people, I'm assuming, don't want to have to be doing this every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks. That's why they elected us to do that. So, I think that if you'd be willing, you've already put a motion out there. I think a possible avenue, right? Trying to think through what you've been mentioning here, some of the conversation going around. We vote on these books tonight. That solves the issue. We go ahead and vote on them. They're sexually explicit. We do the roll call vote, as Ms. Maxwell had suggested before. Moving forward, potentially, we can have, and I think it's fair if we're bouncing off what Wilson County has done, we can have our librarians go through the collections, make recommendations, follow the law, as it says. Doesn't mean the books won't arrive to us, doesn't mean they won't come to us, because as I pointed out at the work session, the review process, in my opinion, is not as thorough as it is maybe let out to be. So obviously, if it had been thorough, then there would have been 29 books for the removal. And that's based off you mentioning 4s and 5s being removed, or 5s being removed. They would have been pulled out, but they were not. So in my opinion, I think that's how we should handle the situation where we're currently at. The law is clear. So when it comes to sexually explicit, and Mr. Reed can correct me here, but even the reference in that Ms. Darby read about in whole or part contains depictions of these things, and it refers back to the language. When it refers back to the language, it's referring back to the word that was used. So if it refers to sexual excitement, it's referring to number 15. If it refers to sexual conduct, it's referring to number 14. So in that particular order, it may not require another test. It may not require a three-prong test. But still, where's that going to end up with? We're going to end up with recommendations possibly for the librarians or decisions made at the administration level. But it still falls back on us. We are still the final say. So that would be my suggestion moving forward.
Sorry. Just a couple of things to answer the question about the metro reading list and that it removes them out of circulation. That's really only to a point. First of all, we're still violating state law by having them available at all. Secondly, there's nothing stopping students from sharing that with other students, which is now just taken away the parents' right to know what their child is accessing because you have inappropriate content available that other students have access to that they can share. We do not allow rated R movies to be in our school system. I have to sign a paper giving approval for PG movies for my children to watch. There's a reason for that, and it's unfortunate that our school, that books do not have a rating system that Rutherford County schools can easily say, we're just going to IG and PG rated books. I'm not trying to restrict anybody from reading anything. I'm trying to be a responsible school board member. We are charged with educating children. That is our job. We should be providing materials that do that. And the easiest thing to do is if something is questionable content in regards to the education of a child, it probably shouldn't be there, period. And internet access. We give these children computers, but we don't give them computers without internet restriction. Why? Because there is inappropriate content that is not okay for children to witness, to view. You cannot walk this stuff back once it has been introduced to children. There of young children addicted to pornography. And it's not just in view form. It is in the words they hear, it is in the words they read, it is in all of that content. I am disheartened that things are getting brought out, that people are saying things for shock value. I can tell you, people don't believe that that content that was read tonight is in these books. That I might be wrong, but I would like to say that people that read that tonight read that so that people can understand what we are talking about. We are not talking about light-hearted, sweet Hallmark movie love stories. That's not what we're saying is inappropriate. This is some pretty hardcore, serious stuff that most children are not ready for. And if your child is, there are plenty of places for you to get that. That is not my job. That is yours. That is your child. I don't like the insinuation that because parents don't want these books there, that they're not monitoring their children. I monitor my children. My daughter came home with a book from the library that I ended up finding out was inappropriate. And guess what? There was nothing in the description of that book that would have said there was inappropriate material in there. So we are living in an age where it is extremely difficult to monitor all of the things that our children witness. The last thing our school system needs to be doing is allowing access to that material. Whether or not it's going under obscene or sexually explicit, the state law, the Rutherford County School Board policy states that the board is to review and make a decision. So I think the board has to decide two things. Are we taking the vote on the motion? Are we taking the vote on the books? And if we are we taking the vote in regards to sexual explicit or obscenity?
Madam Chair, I used to teach math, and I hope I was a better teacher than I am now, but the motion Mr. Falk made was that these books are taken out of circulation, which means they're not available to any student unless that parent gives them permission. Now, they may share it, but you can't control that. They might borrow that cell phone that's got stuff on there. But that's what our problem is. We're doing away with it. We agree that they are something. They don't need to be in the regular run-of-the-mill distribution. And that's what Mr. Fox, that's his motion, to take them out of circulation. And if you want your child to read the load or whatever it is, we can have that. But that's only the only, in these librarians, we've got the best in the world. And to sit there and people criticize and all like that, the librarians, they do a phenomenal job. And I tell you, Mr. Vaughn, I talk to them, and I tell you, the thing about it is they understand this problem also. And some schools don't even have on the rack. And they haven't even put them right there. So they understand too. And that's all we want to do. I don't know why we just keep going down this rabbit hole that, you know, that we made a motion in the second that we wanted to remove these books other than, like I said a minute ago, I hope I'm teaching better now than I was then. I hope I taught them better now than
Mr. Reed,
But it's either, it's either burn them out there, or, we've taken them away, we've moved them out.
Mr. Reed, is Mr. Watt's motion a motion that we can vote on?
You have a motion and a second before the board. I don't know if that motion will fail or pass, but the board has to act on that motion first before you make additional motions. So there has to be a vote on the motion that was made and seconded. And for clarity purposes, it might be good if discussion is stopped, we're
Yes.
finished this discussion.
I think
Keep the motion, but yes, so we're clear on what his motion was.
Yes, are we clear? Can you read the motion one more time?
You want me to read it?
Yes, please.
Oh. Can I add one thing before Mr. Reed? Any change to policy has to go before policy committee, so this would have to be a separate type of thing that we'll discuss later.
Yeah, and that's, not knowing everything here, that's the reason I kind of left it open-ended if you listen to it, that's what I was. I don't have a running here quite up under me yet, I'll get it figured out around here. I move to instruct the high school librarians, otherwise known as media specialists, to create an area for parent approval only books. This section will immediately, on passage of this motion, be created tomorrow. And any library having these 7 books shall maintain them in this area. Going forward, any book contained in the high school libraries that have a rating of 3 or 4 on booklooks.org shall also be contained in this area, and any book with a rating of 5 shall be removed immediately. Furthermore, any book purchased or donated that falls into this rating system of 3 or 4 shall also be contained in this area. I so move.
Ms. Maxwell?
Yes, Ms.
I need to have a clarification. Are we going for all 5 books?
I'm doing the whole group.
Okay, can we take a recess for 5 minutes? I've got to talk to Mr. Reed.
Yes.
Thank you.
Friendships. I mean, I know myself, I've got people here that I go to church with, and I live with every day, and, it's just not, we're so blessed to live in a country like America. Golly, don't let something like this divide our community. We've got a great community, and let's work together to keep it that way.
Mr. Hall, yeah, let's get started. Mr. Tibble, did you have?
Couple things. So as
We can't hear you.
Is that a deep talk? Anybody know any good trivia? All right. So a couple things real quick. If we go with the current motion that's on the table, that would not affect any of these books because that motion can't go into effect until it goes through policy committee. So that therefore would just be dodging the vote on these books. Next, the Wilson County had a mature reading list. That's what they had, what's being proposed tonight. They just removed all the books on their mature reading list because of the new state law. Lastly, point that I'd like to make is that all of the books that you've heard of tonight, all of these would all be put on the mature reading list, not removed. So if you heard anything tonight that sounded like sexually explicit content, your ears did not fool you, and neither would that be removed from the school district. And with that, I'd like to make a motion to amend the motion that we vote on these books individually, as was presented the other night, and that we do not move forward with a mature reading list that can be added to the policy committee for debate at that point.
Ms. Maxwell? That's a whole new motion. So that's a
Mr.
whole
Reed?
new.
I made a motion to amend. What is required after a motion to amend?
Well, I want to say that I did something similar that you guys did, and then
motion. So we don't do things consistently. So I would say, since my motion got shouted out when I did amendment, I would say this is a point of order.
It's okay to file a motion to amend. The motion to amend must relate to the original motion. It cannot contradict the original motion. So it has to be a motion made that relates, to amend, that relates to the original motion. So a motion to amend is okay if it relates to the original motion and that motion to amend is seconded. But it cannot contradict the original motion.
Contradict.
What is your amendment again?
My amendment is that we review these books tonight, as you had originally presented. We do a roll call vote on these books. That part does not affect, the other motion, as the motion that was currently made can't go into effect until a policy committee approves it. So that would leave these books in limbo. I think it's our duty and why we were elected to make that decision. That's why that's part of the amendment. The other portion is that it said it cannot contradict. Well, then I'll make an amendment that the
We can consistently one amendment or two amendments.
one. Okay.
Point of order, you've already got an amendment
We
on
have
the
an
floor.
amendment on the floor.
Yeah, I thought you asked me to repeat that.
Yes, okay, sorry, go ahead.
So, with that, I make a motion to amend that we vote on these books individually through roll call vote.
Point of order.
It's not contradictory. Makes my
Is that a contradiction?
I think the original motion called for all the votes we voted on in one time. The motion to amend is to have them voted on individually.
And
I would,
the reader's list, what's your reading list? So it contradicts.
It does come, it does. He
This
has
is
to
Madam, Mr. Clark, Mr. Vaughn, did your motion include any voting on these books tonight?
My motion stated to remove these books tomorrow morning and put them in a mature reading area. Yes.
So that.
I'm taking them all as one. We're not cherry picking.
Okay, so that can't happen because it has to go to the policy committee. So I don't know if this amendment is in contradiction or not, I just want clarification on that.
I would say this, I think with respect to the motion that Mr. Ball made, it's okay if the board decides to vote on that. And that's what they're going to do, take action tonight. I think the board can do that. So, because that's not a direct change in the policy that we have tonight. That's something what Mr. Ball is moving and this board will determine to do tonight if the board decides to do that. I will say secondly, Mr. Ball has requested all these be taken up collectively and voted on together. I think if the amendment, which Mr. Tidwell has proposed, calls for individual votes on these books to determine whether or not they go in this list or in this mature category or not, I think that is an okay motion to amend if it's seconded and the board votes to adopt that amendment to it. Then you would take Mr. Vaught's motion and apply it to the 7 books individually at a time. So, and I think that if that was an amendment that this seconded and voted on by the affirmative group of the board, that would be an appropriate second amendment on it. In the event, the second component of Mr. Tidwell's motion, though, to not have the mature reading list would be contradictory to Mr. Vaught's motion. I don't think that would be appropriate for an amendment.
That's my question. Just a point of clarification on that. Are you saying that we would vote on the 7 books individually or as a collective based off my amendment?
If your motion to take up these books individually is what I understood to be, you would take Mr. Vaught's proposed motion and apply it individually to each of these books, vote book by book, and have an individual vote, book by book, as to whether or not it falls within the category of what Mr. Vaught proposed, which is basically to have the book removed and placed in the mature category, restricted access, effective tomorrow. So I don't know if that was the intent of your motion to amend, but I understood that if that is the intent, I think that is okay motion, that is an acceptable motion to amend if it gets seconded and this group, board as a whole, majority votes in favor of amending the motion.
I have a question, and I'll get to the story, I promise. He had a motion, he seconded it, does it have to be amended? Can Mr. Vaught say, I don't want my motion just to be, we go ahead and just vote on his motion?
No, there could be a motion to amend that by Mr. Two.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
For clarification purposes, how can we vote on a motion that is requiring action tomorrow, actually not able to happen? So, no, I'm serious, like, would Mr. Watt amend his motion to move his mature reading list to the policy committee meeting, and we can leave these particular books separated out and do our job and vote on these? And then revisit the mature reading list at the policy committee meeting, because we can't address that until then.
Is that the
No, that is not, this bunch right here wants those books removed. And I want them removed in the morning. I want them put behind the counter in the morning. That's the intent of my motion. If you want to do what? I thought we weren't gonna talk over each other. If we're wanting to create policy, you can refer it to the policy committee. Being the new kid on the block, I don't know exactly how the policy is written and how it's referred to. You're more experienced than I am with that. If you want to amend the motion, direct it to the policy committee, that's fine. I'm good with it. We'll talk about it as a policy. But tonight, my motion is to remove them immediately and put them in a mature reading list, period.
You would have to have a mature reading list policy to put them in it.
You're getting into semantics right now.
I'm not. This is, respectfully, we have a policy that speaks to how we are to review and vote on removing books when they have been challenged. The mature reading list was brought up at a previous policy meeting and was not taken up. So if you want to have one, please add it to the policy committee meeting and we can address that at that time. I have said from the start of this, that's a separate issue from the 7 books that are here tonight. You can't remove them and put them somewhere that doesn't currently exist.
There's a motion, a second on the floor. Mr. Tibbles made a motion to amend. I don't know if I heard whether it was a second or not on the motion to amend. I would say.
Yes, there was a second.
Okay. So with respect to your motion to amend, we need to take action on the motion to amend and then come back to the original motion. So the motion to amend, as I understand it, is to take up Mr. Vaught's motion with respect to these books individually as opposed to collectively.
We can put a second on that, but it is not to add them to a non-existent list.
That's going to be contradictory to his motion because Mr. Vaught has proposed these be removed and put into a mature thing for tomorrow. So that's something he's going to do. If the board wants to take up this policy and change the policy later on or address it differently, this board can do that at policy committee. But before, tonight, you have an action item on the agenda. You've got a motion that's made. You have a motion that's been seconded. So from a procedural standpoint, you have to act on the motions that have been made tonight. And this, as board, you can take action on these books tonight. That's why this is on the agenda. So you can determine tonight what action to take with respect to these books. So that is proper before you tonight. If you want to then change the policy in the future, you can do that. Go back and do another policy change. That's a separate debate, a separate question than what you have before you tonight. Because what you have before you tonight is a final decision on respect to these 7 books. So if you want, and I do, if the majority of the board wants to vote on these, Mr. Vaught's motion individually with these books, that will be a proper amendment if you want to do that. But to contradict his motion altogether is not something we can do by motion to amend.
Madam Chairman, I call for a question on the amendment.
That requires a 2/3 vote.
Ms. Cole?
All right.
Question on the motion. Ms. Darby?
No, I need more clarification.
Do you want to get discussion or do you want to continue?
Question we called, there's no more debate.
I got the clarification.
Mr. Vaughn?
I'm ready to vote.
Okay. You're gonna end debate, so we need two-thirds. Are you agreeing to end the debate?
Well, I want everybody to understand the way you're going to say, I approve or no.
There's no discussion on, we're just making sure that the board has to vote for whether it's discussion or not. That's the.
We're voting to end debate.
Yeah, I'm through.
Mr. Tidwell?
No.
Mrs. Rosales?
Yes.
Mr. Vaught?
Yes.
Ms. Sharp?
No.
Mrs. Maxwell?
Yes.
4 yeses.
Fails.
So,
Would
can I,
you like to do?
can I ask, if Mr. Tidwell, if his amendment said he wants to amend the motion to take the vote on these 7 books, whether or not to remove them, and move the conversation of the mature reading list to the next policy committee meeting, is that an acceptable amendment?
No.
Okay.
So,
Ms. McAfee.
yes, Mr. Tidwell.
So you're saying that would be contradictory just to postpone it?
If this board as a whole wants to postpone this and deal with it later, and Mr. Vaught's willing to withdraw his motion, and the second is withdrawn, and you decide as a board to table this and deal with it at the policy committee or at some future meeting, that's something that could happen, but that would require Mr. Vaught to withdraw his motion, and the second would have to also be withdrawn.
I'm specifically talking about the amendment, since the amendment would be to postpone it, it wouldn't be necessarily contradictory to his amendment, I'm just saying at a later time.
Yeah, that is contradictory, because his motion is to take action tonight.
Okay, then my next question on that particular topic is, as Ms. Darby's pointed out, we don't have a mature reading list. Voting on one tonight won't create one tomorrow.
By my interpretation, what he would do, you would create, that would be the first 7 books on the mature reading list, because that's what the board is talking about doing, that we see these 7 books. And then there'll be whatever further action the board wants to take with other books in the future, this board could then decide through policy or however you want to address that. But the only issue before the board tonight are these 7 books. So these 7 books are what the agenda item is that the board has to act on tonight, or choose not to take any action on it. So issues with respect to maturity list and books and all that from a policy standpoint is something you take up later if you decide to do that. But it is appropriate if this board decides to do something with respect to these 7 books and remove them from access to everyone at your board action tonight. That's something this board can do if this board decides to do that.
Ms. Darby.
I'm very unclear, because Dr. Sullivan has stated we cannot have a mature reading list until it comes before the policy committee meeting. The motion is to add these books tomorrow to a list that does not currently exist.
The motion that's on the floor tonight would create that list. It would.
How can it create the list if the board didn't vote to create that list to begin with? He's saying that has to happen at the policy committee.
The board action, if the board acts on this tonight, the board would in effect be creating a list of these 7 books will be going on that will be subject to the rules that Mr. Vaught is proposing with respect to those 7 books.
So the policy committee meeting means nothing?
The policy committee means that whatever kind of policies that they want to take up later on with respect to books, they can. There may be other books that they want to consider, that the librarians consider to go on that list and be treated the same as the 7. But the issue you have before you tonight is as to these 7 books. So, and you know, you can call it a mature reading list or whatever you want to call it, but the action that's being proposed is that those 7 books be removed effectively tomorrow, and you have limited access be created for those books effective
Well,
tomorrow.
let's be clear that they're not being removed. They are being placed elsewhere and are still accessible. They're not out of our school library, which is what state law requires. Do you, Mr. Simmons, do you want to continue your amendment or rescind it?
I'm going, Ms. Maxwell, I would like to rescind my amendment since it is gonna have no bearing as long as Ms. Sharp's okay rescinding her second. Seeing as we're simply moving these sexually explicit books into a different part of our library, I'll let the board decide on their own vote on that.
I think we're ready to vote on the amendment, the original amendment. Nope.
No,
I mean, sorry, I made a motion, I apologize. The original motion, I'm so sorry, it's been a long time.
Ms. Maxwell?
Okay, because of the way that the motion reads, I will not be able to vote on it as a whole, because I worked with because of my previous, so I will not be able to vote for that.
I've got one point of clarification then. There's always been this magic date of September the 19th, and there's something I read somewhere that said action had to be taken within 60 days or something, or the books got referred to the state committee. Is that what happens?
There is some language saying that books get referred onto the state if they're not, if the board does not take action within 60 days.
Okay.
The complaint is brought before the board. The state will say that they will not be reviewing these books unless the person complaining about the books files an appeal to the state. So from a state standpoint, they probably will not hear an appeal or review these books unless the person challenging these books presents an appeal before the state. So that is the state's position with respect to how the statute reads.
All right, so I want to iterate this. Since Mrs. Rosales cannot vote on this motion, there is a possibility that this would be a tie vote. And in my understanding of Robert's Rules of Order, then the motion would fail. Then unless somebody made another motion to vote on them individually, and then that motion failed because of the tie vote, then these books would end up staying on the shelves until that individual appealed to the state, correct?
If there's a tie vote, that's in effect what would happen.
So we could end up not taking any action tonight if there's a strong possibility it could be a split vote right here.
Some motion will have to have 4 votes.
Yes, that's what I want clarification on. So, if you want the books off, you need to vote for the motion.
Or we can vote to remove the books.
Let's go ahead and have a roll call vote. On the original motion from Mr. Wall.
Mr. Tidwell. Heavy no.
Mrs. Darby? Ms. Sharp?
100% no.
Mr. Vaught?
Yes.
Mrs. Rosales?
Abstain.
Mr. Vaughn?
Yes, ma'am.
Mrs. Maxwell?
Yes.
Split.
Ms.
Ms.
Maxwell.
Maxwell?
Hold on. Mr. Walker, give it to you. Yes, Ms. Rosales.
Yes, okay. I make a motion that we table this, so until we get from the challenger who challenged this, exactly how we're gonna challenge this, because there's confusion. Even though we have that statute of the different definitions, we cannot, as a board, pick one over the other. So, it has to be one definition, and it's supposed to be a single, that was my understanding. But if it's sexual explicit, then that needs to be the challenger. So I move to table this so that we can get this back on the agenda with the right way of how it's supposed to be challenged as a motion.
Mr. Tidwell.
There needs to be a second on the motion.
Okay.
If there's no second, it fails.
Yes, Mr. Tibble.
I'd like to make a motion.
Okay.
I would like to make a motion that we vote on each one of these books individually, as a board, as we're elected to do, on it being sexually explicit content, of which you are all aware.
Second. The motion is to call for a vote for each one of these books.
They gave a motion that's to take these votes individually and determine whether or not they're sexually explicit. I believe is what the motion was. I don't want to re-bring it.
That's correct, I'm just gonna.
We'll make an amendment to the amendment.
Yes, Mr. Tibble.
You know, I want these books out to share, and, you know, that's the thing, you know. Hey,
Please stop talking and
you know, if you people can't keep your mouth shut, just.
Okay.
Just, you know, the thing about it is, we're trying to, you know, and
Let's,
here's
we have, Mr. Vaughn.
right.
Mr. Vaughn, we have.
Here's the thing about it, I want to take it off the shelves. And I don't see why we're doing it, they're removed.
Mr. Vaughn.
Okay, can we go, we're gonna go one by one, does that mean that they're gonna be, what does that mean?
I'll clarify. We're gonna vote on whether they are sexually explicit and should be removed by Tennessee state law based on sexually explicit content in the book, with the board being the final determination of that. That's what we're voting on. If you vote in the affirmative to this motion, you'll be voting for removal. If you vote against this motion, you'll be voting to retain.
Gentlemen, clear.
No.
Sorry, Mr. Vaughn.
The motion, is a motion to, but for the determination that both these are sexually explicit and should be removed. Is that the motion?
Yes.
And this
That's what
is
the second was.
Dargell, so sorry. It's been a long night. Ms. Maxwell, can I get clarification for Jeffrey? Yes.
Okay, so based on sexual explicit, it doesn't fall under obscenity at all, so is it part and whole? Part and whole then? Is that the interpretation now at this point? Since it was never clear on the agenda how it was supposed to be, voting for it.
I understand the agenda, the motion that Mr. Tidwell made was to basically determine these books individually, whether or not they're sexually explicit or not. And if they are, and then if so, they will be removed.
That is correct.
Right, but is it based on whole or in part? The sexual explicit? Because in CNA, it's really different, and that's part of the statute, and, I was under the impression that you had to pick one or the other, so sexual explicit, it was never supposed to come to us anyway, if it was that, so I just need clarification from
Mr. Tidwell did not delineate the difference in his motion. So his motion was for the board to determine whether these are sexually explicit and for the books to be banned. Banned, but would be removed.
I am, for clarity's sake, I am making specifically to the sexually explicit, which would include, according to the law, in whole or in part. That is my clarity.
Is that okay with first and second motion?
Just roll call, please. All right, the first book is Beloved. Mr. Vaughn.
No.
Ms. Sharp.
Yes.
Mrs. Darby.
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn.
I'll have to say yes.
Mr. Tidwell.
Yes.
Mrs. Rosales. Ms. Rosales.
I know.
Ms. Rosales.
Yes, I know.
whole and part.
Mrs. Maxwell?
No.
5 yeses. All right, we're going to Queen of Shadows. Mr. Tidwell?
Yes.
Mrs. Darby?
Yes.
Ms. Sharp?
Yes.
Mr. Vaught? Mrs. Rosales?
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn?
Yes.
Mrs. Maxwell?
No.
5 yes. The next one is Tower of Dawn. Mrs. Darby?
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn? Mr. Tidwell?
Yes.
Mrs. Rosales?
Yes.
Mr. Vaught? Ms. Sharp?
Yes.
Mrs. Maxwell?
No.
5 yes. The next book is Homegoing. Mrs. Rosales?
Yes.
Mr. Tidwell?
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn?
Yes.
Ms. Sharp?
Yes.
Mr. Vaught?
No.
Mrs. Darby?
Yes.
Mrs. Maxwell?
No.
5 yes. The next book is Skin and Bones. Ms. Sharp?
Yes.
Mr. Vaught?
No.
Mrs. Rosales?
I read all these books. No.
Mrs. Darby?
Yes.
Mr. Tidwell?
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn?
No.
Mrs. Maxwell?
No.
That was only 3 yes. The next book is The Perks of Being a Wallflower. Mr. Vaughn?
No.
Mrs. Rosales?
Yes.
Mr. Vaught?
No.
Mr. Tidwell?
Yes.
Mrs. Darby?
Yes.
Ms. Sharp?
Yes.
And Mrs. Maxwell?
No.
4 yes.
Ms. Maxwell,
Yes, Mr. Jones.
I have to step outside. Thank you.
Maxwell. I'd like to take a recess until this resolved. I'm gonna make a motion. I'd like to make a motion. We take a recess until this resolves.
Second.
Chief abstained.
The state legislature does it all the time. They walk out.
Just vacate the seat.
Not saying I agree with what you're saying, that's what they do.
I don't know.
If the rules allow, then.
I don't know. Next book, please.
This is our last book, Wicked. Mr. Vaught? Ms. Sharp?
Yes.
Mrs. Darby?
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn?
Yes.
Mr. Tidwell?
Yes.
Mrs. Maxwell?
No.
4 yes.
Yes, we've got our. Thank you all.
Nothing else with insurance.
Insurance? This week, the Rutherford County School Board was tasked with a difficult decision. This board received over 100 emails, possibly more, for or against retaining 7 books. I assure you, each and every one of us has researched and even prayed over this. We love this community, and as a lifelong resident who grew up in our school system, it hurts to see this issue tear our community apart. I love Rutherford County, and I'm proud to serve on this board, and humbled to be elevated to chairwoman. Regardless of which side you are on, I pray when we adjourn tonight, we can come together to keep serving our community. The school system is very important to us all, and our students' success is paramount. I know this community is strongest when we can work together. All of us up here want to make things better. I believe in leaving such a positive impact, that things are better than you found them. We have much work ahead. With the many challenges the unprecedented growth has brought this county, we have long days ahead. But I have faith in this board, and I want to thank all of you all. I know this was hard tonight.